Thank you. Good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you're joining us from today. So today's webinar is focusing on taking the single sign-on to the next level using the role-based provisioning solution, and we'll be looking at what are the various challenges and efficiencies you can gain by tying the identity governance with your existing single sign-on deployment. So let's start with what do we see in the healthcare. When we look at the healthcare vertical, over the last few years, there have been a lot of different fluid workforces like clinicians, affiliates, residents coming in, students coming and interns coming, people who work at multiple clinics or multiple hospitals as part of the health system. There's a huge explosion of data that everybody has to access. If you think about 10 years ago and now, the amount of data on the patients that we store within our systems has just grown tremendously. Further, the new affiliations, the mergers and acquisitions, some of you may have experienced the M&A activity in the last few years, has also gone up. But I think all of this ties into what we call is the new risk reality. That the insider access, the unauthorized access to PHI has tremendously increased. Over the last couple of years, we have seen the breaches across the industries, not just healthcare, has gone up, of which 25% of all those breaches occur in healthcare industry. If you just think about the cost of protecting those patient records, so before a PwC Health Research had a study last year where they found that it takes about $8 per patient record to implement solutions and tools to protect them. However, after a major breach, that cost per patient record goes up to $200. And that's huge. Think about the amount of patient records you might have in your environment, and for any breach that might happen, whether it's an insider access, unauthorized access, knowingly or unknowingly, or somebody coming from outside accessing it. That cost of taking post-breach action is just huge. So now that we have seen what happens at the organization level, let's take a look at what happens within the organization. What are the challenges we see when we have a department head who has nurses, physicians coming in, and they need access on day one? The challenges that we hear from them are that they don't get the right access on day one. And it could take anywhere from a couple of days to a few weeks to get the complete full access that that person needs to be effective and be able to do their work. On the other side, IT staff tells us that it takes a lot of back and forth, meaning they get a request in an email and they go start creating accounts for those users, and they need to know what permissions to grant them, and they never get the full information, so they have to send back the request saying, okay, what permissions do you want me to assign? And there's a lot of back and forth, which adds to the inefficiencies and also the time it takes to complete that whole task. And then we have security officers and the compliance, a CIO person who wants to know whether the users in their organization has the right access for the job function and whether they're compliant with the organizational policies. So with all these different personas who have their own challenges to be productive and be able to service the patient population, what happens behind the scenes and why is there so many challenges? So unlike many other industries, in healthcare there are so many different personas that you have to worry about, the actual end user personas. Think about physicians, nurses, RNs, students, residents, interns, contractors, vendors. They all need different set of rights, and that's what adds to the dynamics of the challenges that we see in healthcare as part of managing those identities. And from the department manager perspective, they just want that person to get access right away and with the appropriate access that they need for their job. On the other side, the security managers wants to know that when somebody leaves the organization, they're taken out of the system. I mean, that's one of the things that we hear from our customers, where they know when the person's coming on board, but when they're changing their job or when they're leaving the organization, they don't always get notification about those changes. If a person came at the department level versus from an HR system, that's even worse, because then the person has already gone. IT never gets notification of that person, contractor or a temp user leaving, and those access remain active in various systems, which adds to a potential risk area of somebody abusing the access privileges of that user. So how do we provide a solution that could help address these challenges and also get better handle on the identities and the governance of those identities? That's where Imprivata's identity governance solution can help. So think about Imprivata's offering that you already know about, single sign-on, confirm ID, which offers end users, the clinical users, to be able to walk up to a workstation, tap the badge, click on the application, get signed in automatically. When they need to perform multi-factor authentication for clinical workflows or EPCS type workflows, they can simply click, use the two-factor authentication and get the work done. But before they got access to those applications, somebody had to sit there and grant them access. Somebody had to know that Dr. Smith is going to show up on Monday and needs so-and-so application access like Epic or Cerner with this permissions, and then have them added to the single sign-on solution. So now with Imprivata Identity Governance Solution, the whole onboarding process is streamlined. The request could come from an HR system. It could come from a credentialing system. It could come from a ticketing system. Any source system can send notifications into the identity governance solution, which will initiate the process of creating accounts or even modifications, job changes, terminations that might come from HR system. And because of defining roles that are tied to the job function or the department they work in or the facility they're working or a combination thereof, we can decide what application should be granted access to for that user, and within each application, what are the permissions or entitlements that are needed to be granted. Now, the role definition of role-based access control allows us to define the applications and the access permissions in each application, but then the next step is automating that whole process. Instead of having somebody log into the application and then filling out the form and assigning checkboxes and drop-down list and so on, we can even automate the provisioning step of identity creation and management. Once the user has access to and they are happily using it on day one and uses it for like 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, during the course of the usage, you want to have a way the department managers and the security team wants to know that they have the right access for the job. So that's where the whole attestation workflow comes into play. You could schedule tasks that could be sent out to department managers who can review the direct reports access and make sure that they certify that what they have access to is the right access for the job. If they need to make some changes, they can initiate the remediation workflow right from within that report. So you don't have to open up your email, don't have to send out an email to an IT person to request a change to that access. From the end user perspective, if they need additional set of application access, a new application access or changes, they don't have to go and call IT to make those changes. They can use the self-service functionality built into the identity governance solution. The self-service functionality allows them not just to reset their application passwords, but also submit application requests, new application requests. And because it's a self-service request, you can implement workflows which could be sent to managers to approve those requests before it gets routed to additional workflows within the solution. And finally, from the CIO perspective, the compliance team, they want to know that they have a single dashboard where they can look and see if there are any potential risk areas within the organization. And what kind of risk areas could you think would you want to see on that dashboard? One of the examples would be orphaned accounts. Orphaned accounts are one where somebody left the organization and IT person goes and disables an AD account. However, what happened to that application credentials? They are still active, sitting there. And if they are forgotten to be taken out of those applications, they could be misused by somebody else. So you want to have a report that shows how many potential orphan accounts exist in various applications. Or mismatch entitlements. The role definition says here's a set of privileges this user should have. However, from the actual application, the data that we are seeing, it may be different. So that somebody provided or performed a modification of rights that the solution did not know about, and we can flag that as a mismatch entitlement. And finally, when the user is changing jobs or leaving organization, whether they're a full-time employee or a temp nurse, temp users, students, you want to know that they can be taken out of all the application systems they have access to with as simple as click of a button. So the HR system, the credentialing system, the ticketing system could send a feed of users who may need to be taken out of the solution and all the different applications. Or you can have an IT person log into the portal and simply say disable the identity of so-and-so user. And that's the provisioning part. So think about the identity governance providing a full life cycle of an identity for a person in your organization. Not the clinical user, it could be any person within the enterprise. You want to know that even for non-clinical users, whatever applications they have access to, they're granted based on the rights, based on the role and the job function they have. Here's the executive dashboard that I just mentioned. So this is the risk dashboard that your security team, the IT team, the compliance team can leverage to see what's happening within the organization, the compliance aspects, the potential risk areas. And this is a role-based dashboard. And what does that mean? Role-based dashboard means if you have an IT type role, you get a operational type dashboard that you will see, like how many requests have been pending in the system, how many approvals are needed, or how many approvals are still pending and have not been processed. From the compliance or security perspective, you could have a dashboard that shows the orphan account count, how many application accounts are still active, whose active directory corresponding AD account are disabled. Or mismatch entitlement. Given that you all have single sign-on solution, think about the scenario where a user who was provisioned using the identity governance solution into, let's say, 4 applications, but somehow they're leveraging 5 applications on the single sign-on side. We can match that data between the 2 solutions given the integration of OneSign and the identity governance, and can potentially highlight that this user was granted additional access outside of the identity governance solution. And that's one of the huge things that we hear from our other customers is how do they ensure that every IT person goes through, and every IT activity for application account requires goes through this solution. Let's talk about some customer success stories. So as we think about, so far what we have seen is what are the potential challenges we address, what are the various feature sets available with the solution. Now I'm going to cover some of the customers and the benefits that they have seen with the solution. So at the top here is a customer in South Central location, and what you see here is before they were going through a hospital acquisition. So they were acquiring a hospital in the same town, and they needed to bring on board various users from the acquiring hospital and give them access to various applications. And they looked at how much time would it take to get it done. And the estimate that came out was 20 employees working 8 hours a day for a whole week to create 1,100 new accounts for those users. So given that they fast-tracked the identity governance solution deployment to get those users onboarded in those applications, that whole process was done within a single day to provision those 1,100 clinical users into the EMR and the PACS and other applications. So think about just the difference, going from a 20 employee, 8 hours a day for a week to getting it done within a single day, and only one resource was used to create a feed that was sent into the identity governance solution. That's the value prop that we expect and we believe everyone every healthcare organization can achieve as part of as they go through mergers and acquisitions, or even when you go through your EHR deployments. We have had customers who go from one EHR to another EHR, going from, let's say, McKesson to Epic or Cerner. And as part of that transition, they have to onboard all their clinical users into the new EHR and grant them the right access. So you don't have to wait for mergers and acquisitions. There could be a scenario within your organization today that could really benefit from automation in the identity management. The other quote you see here is from another customer in Southeast who uses the governance capabilities and the compliance task capabilities to perform a periodic access reviews. And what this means is they have every quarter they send out notifications to all the line managers, and that's about 200 plus line managers get those notifications to review their employees, their direct reports access, and they have to review row by row, and within the way that they have configured their workflow is that each line manager has to go through each row and put check mark saying, yep, they reviewed it, and if they wanted to request changes from within the report, they have an option to initiate a workflow that will start with the either suspension of that account for that employee or job privilege changes or entitlement changes, which can then be processed right away, or depending on the workflow, it can be sent over to an approver to complete the task. So since they have deployed the governance capabilities, they can implement this task that could be run every quarter automatically, and they can create an audit report which would then be shared with the board of directors and the executive team every year to show that they have all their users compliant with the policies they have implemented for their job function and what access they need. So I'm going to have Joel talk more about how the Imprivata's identity and access management portfolio can help and come together here.
Yeah, thank you, Jamin. So as Jamin mentioned, thank you so much. You walked us through our identity governance value proposition and really what we provide in really changing the approach to governance, risk, and compliance as it relates to healthcare. And so I think what we've really focused our story on, which really takes us to the next level, is the identity and access management solution as a whole, right? When we think about combining the single sign-on capabilities from OneSign, our Imprivata OneSign product, and taking the streamlined workflow capabilities from our Imprivata Confirm ID solution, and then adding on the Imprivata Identity Governance solution, really comes together as a whole. So as we think about it, let me just walk you through, take a step back and kind of at least highlight our OneSign story and then Confirm ID and show how that comes together. So when you think of OneSign, you think of single sign-on capabilities, right? When you have your physicians no longer have to waste their time with usernames and passwords onto systems, they can simply use their badge to tap into their workstations, which gives them single sign-on access to their applications. And this can be on workstations that are thick clients or thin and zero clients as well, virtual workstations as well. So it's really streamlining the process of how these physicians and the end users access those systems. Then when you think about e-prescribing, right, when you think about prescribing, electronically prescribing controlled substances, right, it's the same concept of those workflows where if I'm a physician today, I want to be able to prescribe those medications directly from the systems I'm using. So with Imprivata, you're able to authenticate and meet the DA requirements to authenticate and electronically prescribe those substances, right? And so automatically, this is done through your workflows. There's no real change that you have to implement. It's very streamlined for the end user. When you think about how identity governance relates to all of this, if I'm the end user, right, and I'm trying to enable, I'm trying to really streamline my workflow, I get access into my workstations with tap and go functionality on day one, right? I no longer have to really send a request to IT. There's no real external processes. All those individual capabilities that I've come to trust over the years, I'm able to now get those on day one, right? And from an IT perspective, if I'm provisioned for these applications and I'm provisioned for this process, once I do leave the facility, right, again, from an IT perspective, that user is then deprovisioned and they no longer have that access into those applications. So it's really that full life cycle. And then as we think of again, the IT perspective, right, it's a story around compliance, it's a story around risk, and understanding, right, how often your users maybe logging into these systems, et cetera. You get full visibility into who's accessing what systems and when and whether they should be accessing those systems. So it's really streamlining the process for the end users as well as IT. So if you kind of think about the workflow, right, when you think about the end-to-end IAM suite for healthcare, let me walk you through kind of a day in the life, if you will, with identity governance deployed at a facility, with our identity and access management portfolio deployed at a facility. So let's say I'm Dr. Clark, and I'm a new physician in the ER department, and I just joined the facility. HR would enter, Dr. Clark's information into the HR system. So that's a system that's got my credentials in it. Once you do that, right, the identity governance processes ensure that Dr. Clark automatically has access to all the ER applications, and they can simply swipe their badge to get access into those workstations and applications as well. So again, it's streamlining that process for the physician, the end user, on day one. Now, Dr. Clark looks up a patient, the HR system, let's call him Adam Briggs for the time being, to prescribe a controlled substance. Right, so with our Imprivata Confirm ID solution, Dr. Clark can easily complete those two-factor authentication processes, to submit the controlled substance prescription. Then, again, from an audit perspective, right, from the IT perspective, an auditor can review the user's entitlements and access to hospital systems in response to an audit request. So that now gives me insight into the trends, right, the user behavior of access into these individual systems throughout my facility, right? We oftentimes hear about facilities using, it's not just one or two systems, it's not just one or two applications, it's multiple applications. And it's multiple user groups, right? Different user groups across their entire facility that they need to enable. So again, at the end, right, Dr. Clark leaves the organization and all their access privileges are terminated right away. So again, from a security perspective, as Damon highlighted earlier, if someone leaves the facility, you don't want them having access to those systems still after they leave. So with identity governance, with our Confirm ID solution and our One-Sign solution, it's really the holistic approach to managing your identities, to really streamlining your processes, and ensuring that at the end of the day, you are maintaining your security guidelines and ensuring that the focus is really put back on the patients. So with that, I kind of walked through the overview of this, but we've come to the end of the presentation, so we can thank you so much. I don't want to take the shine away from Damon, but we'd love to get some questions here, so we'll open it up for some questions. But if you do want a more detailed deep dive, please do reach out to our to your customer success manager, or email us at sales@imprivata.com, or email any one of us really if you do have any follow-up questions as well. So I'll stop right there. I'll leave room for questions here.
Yeah, I can jump into a few that I've been seeing as they're coming in. So the first one is we do not have rules and user profiles defined. Do we have to build that out first before we can use the solution?
Oh, that's a great question. So you do not need to build out roles to implement or start taking benefit of the identity governance solution. So role definition could be as simple as saying a user, a physician working in this department can get AD, Exchange, Epic or Cerner application, PACS application. Even just the application level definition can also be a good starting point. And once you start using it over a 6-month, 9-month, 12-month period, you will start seeing a pattern saying all physicians in this department get this type of entitlements within your EHR. And in a different department, nurses get this type of, and now you can start defining more granular role definitions. But you do not need to have roles or user profiles defined to get started with the identity governance solution.
So there's another related question then to that. Is there a limit on the number of access roles and groups that we can create with this product?
So I'll take that one on. So there really is no limit to the number of access roles that you can create. We see facilities that have hundreds of roles created, right? And it's again to enable the different iterations, the different types of users that may need access. Healthcare isn't just a static industry. It's constantly changing. There's new users that come into your facility. There's, every year it may be a different type of user that comes in, a different type of clinician, et cetera. So really, if you can think of a user group, you can create it within the solution.
So Joel, I will also add some more things to it. So one of our customers in the case study I mentioned, so one of our customers who before implementing identity governance, they had about 10,000 types of roles defined. And that's a huge number. Think about this, 10,000 roles. And how did they end up with 10,000? Is because over the years, they started off with one set of definition. Then somebody said, we need this extra exception, one extra application for this user, so they defined a new role definition. And over time, they just kept defining and defining and defining. So when we were out there implementing and helping them with their role migration definitions, it turned out that they had 10,000 roles, and nobody in that team knew which ones are really active and which ones are just sitting there not being used or could be deleted. So one of the things they did as part of the implementation is to refine, start from the basics, saying let's start with all the physicians, let's start with all the nurses, pharmacists, IT, administrative staff, and so on. And then they started defining additional granular entitlements to each role. So at the end of that implementation, the 10,000 number was down to 1,800. And they are still going through more refinement to bring it down. But that's the amount of, that's the benefit you get when you start thinking about your roles, whether you have it or not, but you start grouping them together, makes it even much easier when you have automated provisioning.
Yep, and I think Jamin, just to add one more thing there, oftentimes when we speak to customers, I think the idea of being able to automate the processes behind all of these different groups, I think that's where you really start seeing value, right? Where if without the solution, you may either not be able to create these categories properly, but if you do, you're now having to manually either update those access groups, or you have to manually update your processes whenever someone else new comes in, or you have to engage with the different managers. It creates a very, very cumbersome process for the IT teams who could really be focused on on higher priorities. So I think it's definitely valuable to speak to that.
Great. So I see another question here. Do applications have to be managed through Active Directory to work with this? So that is, so you do not have to have applications go through Active Directory. Identity governance, what it does is interfaces with our HR ticketing or credentialing system. It takes a feed. It automatically creates AD account, email account, and various application accounts. And those applications don't have to be AD aware or LDAP authentication ready. They could have its own user store. So when you think about Epic or Cerner or Meditech and others, that's what we see. When Epic and Cerner, Meditech allows you for LDAP authentication, the authorization part is still within each application. So you do not have to have applications that are AD connected. You can have it, they can have its own user store, they can have its own role definition or permissions or security definition, and the solution will ensure that the right access is granted based on the user requirements or user job function.
So I see another one here. So how does your solution work with Epic for managing user accounts?
Can you repeat that question again?
So how does your solution work with Epic for managing user accounts?
That's great. Oh, that's a great question. So Epic is, and similar to Epic, Cerner, Meditech, those are the applications, EHRs, that we see that most of our customers have their users spend most of their time. So in Epic, the way Epic requires or user management happens is there's a concept called EMP record and SER record. So for those folks on the call here who has Epic, this would be something you already are familiar with, that you create an EMP record, you assign appropriate templates in basket pool, and then you create an SER record, and then you link them together to complete that identity. So depending on the user type, you may only need to create an EMP record, or you may have to create both the EMP and SER record and link them. Epic also has this care link option, so depending on which user type you have, you define which type of Epic components get created. We interface with Epic using the Epic's web services. So we can automatically create the EMP record through its web services. Then the SER record goes through a different processing step, which could be either an import tool or HL7 processing. And we can send out the spec file for SER record that can then be processed. And once the SER record is created, we can automatically link the EMP record with the SER record and complete that user's Epic identity.
Great. Excellent. Thank you, Jamin. So I see another question here coming in. Do organizations need to implement the multi-factor authentication solution before implementing the identity governance solution? And they're referring to Confirm ID in this case. So you do not have to implement the multi-factor authentication Confirm ID solution before you implement identity governance. While we do, again, we do encourage folks to look at the solution holistically and look at OneSign, Confirm ID, and identity governance together as a solution. We do see customers that are just implementing OneSign and identity governance, for example, right? So it is not a prerequisite to leveraging the identity governance solution, but again, we do see that some of the more, the more rolled out implementations do include Confirm ID as they want to streamline those EPCS workflows.
So I see another question here. Does this solution only add security groups to an AD account? The answer is no. As a matter of fact, we manage the whole Active Directory account for each identity. So we can create an AD account. We can add them to appropriate AD groups as needed. If they need access to various file shares based on the job function, they can be added to appropriate file share groups or AD group security groups. Same way it manages the exchange. You can manage the AD demographic information. So that self-service functionality we talked about allows users to, if you enable that, you can have users to update their own self-service demographic information, such as phone number, address, and so on, which can then be sent back to another system like HR systems, Lawson, PeopleSoft, or any of those systems. Or we can have Lawson, PeopleSoft, HR system be the source and let that application tell us when to update the user's phone number, address, and so on. We can also manage the user's manager, the organizational attribute within Active Directory. So you could have a hierarchy that could be shown who reports to whom and the whole hierarchical chain within Active Directory.
So I see another question here coming in that says, what ticketing system does this interface with? So I think it's really a kind of a wide array of ticketing systems that we do interface with. In fact, our solution really does interface with a wide array of different applications that exist out there. I'll let kind of Jamin maybe add a little bit more color to it, but I think that's one of the key differentiators here with the solution, that there really is an expansive set of integrations that we provide.
That is correct, Joel. So ServiceNow is one of the most popular ones that we have seen in our customer base. Then there are other ticketing systems, Kronos and so on. So for us, in terms of interfacing with ticketing system, there are a couple of ways you can think about it. A ticketing system could be a source system for us. So somebody who enters all the information for non-employee type users, and generally employees come from HR, but what about non-employees? They could be coming from another web portal or ticketing system where somebody says, I need Joel to get access to this set of applications. That feed could be sent from ticketing system into the identity governance solution. That's one way of interfacing with ticketing system. The other way is when a request comes in from another source, any source, we can, as we start the processing on that identity request, we can go back and create a ticket in the ticketing system so you have a way to track. Now, that step is not necessary because all the tracking can be done within identity governance solution, so end users can also see the status of their own request. So they don't really need a ticketing integration there, but if you wanted to, we can open a ticket, and by that, once we complete the whole identity step for that request, we can go and close the ticket, which means at the end, you can have a report within your ticketing system that shows when the ticket was opened, when was it closed, and you can monitor how long did it take to close the ticket. And why is that important? That allows you to get an ROI on the solution to see whether it's really saving time or not. So prior to automation in place, it may have taken a couple of days to close out the ticket, and now it could be done within hours or minutes, depending on the workflow. So you could quickly realize the ROI benefits by integrating with those ticketing systems.
So I think there's a slightly related question, right, as it relates to supported versions, et cetera. So will it auto-link the Epic EMP SCR together, or does it require human intervention? Any specific version of Epic that is needed for that to work?
Great. So yeah, so we do link the EMP and SCR records automatically, so there is no human intervention required. So we have Epic customers who have implemented a fully automated EMP SCR creation and linking, and we have customers who have only automated EMP and manage SCR separately, and then we link it for them. So you have a variety of different configuration options with Epic Identity Management. There is no specific, I would say, we support Epic 2007 and all later versions of Epic. So we have been doing Epic Identity Management for almost 10 plus years now, so all the different versions of Epic, the latest being 2017 and 2018 is just on its way out here. So any of those versions in between, I have been integrated with.
And that's the case for OneSign and Confirm ID as well, right? As those newer versions of Epic are released, we do support those as well.
So another question I see here is on a Meditech application. So for those folks on the call here who know Meditech, it's one of those applications that allows a lot of customization as part of your identity management and even end user screens. So we have customers who have automated the Meditech identity creation process or management process, and the component that does that work is called Identity Governance Bridge. And that bridge component sits in a data center, and as the request comes in to create a new Meditech user identity with these permissions, it goes and does the work. So similar to Epic and Cerner, now Meditech does not have API, so it goes through the UI, and we have the bridge that will be configured for your screens, for your information that's needed to navigate through the Meditech screens and fill out the forms within Meditech application. And related to that, there is another question is you have some staff members who float and they need a different set of Meditech access after hours versus during regular hours. So you could have the two ways typically you could handle this, depending on how much work and automation you want to have in place. So if they are after hours, you can initiate a request for access privilege changes, and then the Identity Governance Bridge for Meditech can go and apply additional privileges to that user's identity. Or if you tie that to role definition, you can combine all the different permissions for them, so you don't have to keep initiating the access privilege changes. So there are a couple of options here. If you reach out to us, we can work with you and to understand more on how your workflow works with that Meditech access privilege changes, and we can tell you and recommend what would be the best option for your deployment.
So just looking at these, so actually you just answered a similar question to this, so I'm not going to read that one out because you just gave that answer.
I have one more here.
You do?
Yep,
okay.
I see one more here in the Q&A. So the request here is, can managers enter a new user request and when a private account is created? So yes, if you allow managers to have access to submit requests or initiate a request on behalf of their own users, they can start the request process and they can say, here are the applications this user needs access to, and then the application owner or the IT person can approve if you configure the approval workflow, or if there's no approval workflow, it can go and automatically create that identity, and then the manager is notified that account has been created successfully. Now, the second part of the same question is, does it use backend SQL Server or a static list? So, so I'm assuming this is more like what kind of data comes for the new user's identity. That can be configured in a role database, which is a Microsoft SQL Server role database in the system. You could have a static definition, but most of our customers will implement it as part of the role definition, so it can be easily managed and updated after the deployment. So you could have HR team define new job functions, and you could easily add those as part of the role definitions that can be used from that point onwards.
So I think to one of the other questions that's slightly related actually to one of the previous ones that was asked is, will the solution force us to change any other workflows for our end users? I think in particular talking about the clinicians, right? So it really doesn't at the end of the day. When you think about the end users, right, they're what they really trust and have come to really appreciate is the single sign-on capabilities, being able to use their badge to tap into their workstations, applications, those EPCS workflows that are streamlined, right? All of that is, in fact, I'd say enhanced once you add the identity governance solution, right? Because on day one, now you are able to get access into the applications that you need, right? So when you add the identity governance piece, you're now giving those users the access to the applications, but you're giving the right users the right access to the right applications. I think that's the key there. So what they'll see at the end of the day really is the same streamlined workflows that they would see otherwise.
Another question I see is, does this solution require additional appliance, different user license, new admin console, etc.? So this solution does not use any appliance. It leverages a Windows servers and Microsoft SQL Server-based databases, which could be virtualized in your environment. So we will just install the software components on your existing Windows servers and Microsoft SQL Server databases. It is a separate license. So think about your one-sign license today, maybe for your clinical users, but the identity governance license, we recommend think broadly across your enterprise because you want to manage identities across all the different types of user population. So it is a different user license. There is a separate admin console and the portal console for identity governance. It's all web-based. So not just the IT and the security team can log into the portal, even end users can log into the portal. And because they're end users, they get a default login homepage, which allows them to perform self-service functionality, depending on which self-service functionality you're turned on within the solution.
Great. Looks like we do have one more question here. What kind of out-of-the-box reports are available with the product?
Great question. So there are a number of out-of-box reports available in the product. So one of them is application entitlement. So you can create a report on who has access to what applications and what permissions within each application has been granted to that user. The other report is all the transactions that happen within the solution. So who requested access or who initiated the access, who approved the access, when was the request completed, whether it was an automated bridge completing the work, whether it was somebody who was emailed out and they completed the work manually. All the transactions are audited as well. Other type of reports are the orphaned account report. As we mentioned, if somebody just goes and disables an AD account but doesn't disable their application accounts, then those are highlighted as well. So, and all of these reports can be sent out as a task, scheduled task. So you do not have to email it out. You can assign it to a different person saying, can you review this report and let me know if anything needs to be changed. So that's a whole workflow, compliance workflow built into the solution that allows you to manage the notifications and routing of those reports right from within the solution.
Right, so I think one of the next questions I think I see here is you know, what are really the